Today, I'm going to explain an action thriller movie called Escape from Alcatraz. Spoilers ahead, watch out, and take care. The movie opens in 1960 as Frank Morris, a high IQ criminal, is being escorted to the San Francisco coastline. Frank has already escaped from multiple facilities and is being taken to the maximum security prison on Alcatraz Island. This is an extremely strict and modern prison for its time. There are no parole programs. Every inmate is confined alone, and even the visitors must be investigated by the FBI. While the prisoners do have the option to work, it is a privilege that must be earned. On his first day in Alcatraz, Frank makes friends with Litmus, an eccentric inmate who likes to ask others for extra food. He also keeps a mouse as a secret pet and carries it everywhere with him. Frank also notices that a huge inmate known as Wolf keeps making lewd gestures at him. The mouse guy and the aggressive perv. Prison movie bases already covered. Afterwards, the new prisoner is taken to see the warden, an extremely prideful man who loves making the lives of the inmates miserable. The warden explains the rules Frank must obey and asks for the names he may want to authorize as visitors. But the latter has nobody in his life, not even family. The warden then lets Frank go, but reminds him that nobody has ever escaped from Alcatraz, and nobody ever will. This encounter doesn't end up being completely useless though, as when the warden isn't looking, Frank steals one of his nail clippers. He later hides it on the last page of the Bible in his cell. That afternoon, during his first shower, he is approached by Wolf, who claims Frank will be his new punk. "I'm not your punk, punk." It is obvious that he won't take no for an answer, but Frank reacts by punching him a couple of times and stuffing his mouth with a bar of soap. "Wash out your mouth." Later, Frank is sent to help at the library, where he meets English, a black inmate who is serving 2 life sentences. He reveals that he killed 2 men in self-defense 10 years ago. The victims were white men, and since it's 1960, the jury readily dismissed English's testimony and indicted him with an extremely unfair punishment. It is also revealed that prisoners aren't allowed in the library. Thus, Frank's duty today is to go around the cells and offer magazines or books to those who want them. During the break time, Frank meets Doc, an elderly inmate who spends most of his time painting. He's incredibly talented, and the subjects of his paintings vary from himself to the warden. All his portraits include a chrysanthemum flower neatly placed on the subject's head. Sometime later, Frank goes to have a chat with English, who reveals all the details he knows about the prison's anti-escape measures. The small number of inmates who managed to leave their cells were shot by the guards in the watchtowers. Even if a prisoner somehow was able to successfully leave the building, they would have to swim the freezing waters to reach the nearest land. Some days later, during the break time, Litmus mentions that there are ventilation shafts on top of their block. The main problem would be finding a way to get up there. That afternoon, things take a nasty turn when Wolf comes after Frank with a knife, but the latter manages to dodge just in time thanks to a warning from Doc. The two then get into a scuffle, and the guards eventually break it up. However, both Wolf and Frank are taken to solitary confinement despite our hero acting in self-defense. A couple of days later, Frank is released while Wolf is kept a bit longer, as he used a makeshift knife to start the fight. Several weeks pass by, and Frank befriends a new inmate, Charlie Butts, who is assigned to the cell next to his. Frank later introduces Charlie to his other friends when they meet in the yard. While all the prisoners are outside, the warden goes around the cells checking if everything is in order. When he reaches Doc's cell, he discovers a painting of himself. The portrait is flattering and very accurate, but the cruel warden decides to permanently remove Doc's privileges. This leaves the poor guy devastated, as he has no meaning in life anymore. Elsewhere, Frank is given a job in the prison's carpentry team. One afternoon while they're working, he notices that Doc doesn't look well and tries to warn the guards, but no one listens to him, and they simply ask him to get on with his work. Unfortunately, only a few moments later, Doc chops off his fingers with a nearby hatchet. That afternoon during lunchtime, Frank gets a pleasant surprise. John and Clarence Anglin have also been transferred to Alcatraz. It is revealed that Frank knows them from one of his other prison sentences. Just like him, the twin brothers are also adept at escaping, which is the reason why they are here now. A few days later, a bored Frank notices a roach in his cell, escaping through the grill on the wall. He takes a closer look and realizes that the portion surrounding the grill is made up of very weak concrete. He immediately takes the nail clipper he had stolen and tries to chip away the concrete around the grill. To his pleasant surprise, he successfully manages to remove a significant amount of concrete. Frank realizes there's a chance that he can make a hole big enough for his whole body to get through. Later that week, Visitor's Day comes around, and 2 of Frank's friends get news from the outside world. English is visited by his daughter, who tells him that she's getting married. Charlie, on the other hand, is visited by his wife, who reveals that his mother is on her deathbed. Desperate to see his mom before she dies, Charlie later tells Frank that he wants to escape the prison at any cost. Thus, later at dinner, Frank finally reveals his discovery to Charlie as well as the Anglin brothers. The concrete and the grill metal have been weakened by the moist sea air, so they can dig a hole around it. This could get them into the utility corridor, which may lead to the roof. Frank explains that they will use magazine pages to create a fake wall, and this will hide the hole while they're working on it. He has also ordered ordered an accordion under the excuse that he's joining the prison band. No one questioned him on this because people who play accordion are psychos, and they're scary. Frank plans to use the instrument's case to cover his hole. They can also use cardboard from the library to make dummy heads to leave on their beds. That way, they can escape at night, and the guards will have no idea until the morning counts. As the Anglin brothers work in the barber and the clothing shop, one of them can get hair for the dummy, and the other can steal some raincoats. The latter will be used to make primitive rafts that they can use to cross the bay. Upon hearing all of this, the group realizes that their chances of escaping are slim, but they still agree to join. In the next few days, Frank begins working more often on his hole. What are you working on, Frank? My hole. While Charlie keeps an eye out for guards. The nail clipper, however, is extremely difficult to use for a long period since it lacks a proper grip. So, the next day during mealtime, one of the Anglin brothers chats with the guard to keep him distracted. Frank uses this opportunity to steal a spoon and brings one back to the cell with him. Many days later, Litmus gets Frank a dime in exchange for 15 desserts. Frank uses this metal coin to do some welding in his cell. He breaks the spoon to get the grip and the clipper to get the file. Then, he lights up a bunch of matches together to melt the dime and connect the spoon grip with the nail file. Now, he has a proper tool, which he can use to dig faster. He always runs back to his bed when a guard comes by, thanks to Charlie's warning. After many days of digging, Frank manages to remove all the loose concrete, but the grill is attached to the wall and is impossible to get off by hand. Hence, the next time he goes to work at the carpentry shop, Frank makes a wedge that could help. The only problem would be getting it through the metal detector, but he has a plan for that. He purposefully makes the metal detector go off while returning back to his cell. Frank has a wedge in his hand, kept visible for the guard to easily notice. He simply says that he made it to hang clothes in his cell. The guard obviously doesn't believe him and takes the wedge before checking Frank's pockets, but since he has nothing there, he's allowed to leave, and Frank returns to his cell with a second wedge hidden in his shoe. 60 years later, people would use this same tactic to get vapes into concerts. Using this tool, he finally manages to get the grill off the wall. Over the next few months, Charlie and the Anglin brothers begin digging as well. They also start working on the cardboard dummies using magazine pages, water, and the concrete dust they get from digging. Charlie orders a painting set, pretending to have picked up a new hobby, but they'll be using this paint to color the dummies and make cardboard covers for the holes that look like the grill. Once Frank's dummy is completely ready, he puts it in the bed and finally enters the hole to see what's on the other side. Frank finds some stairs that take him to the utility corridor and ultimately opens near the ventilation shafts, but these are on the ceiling and out of reach for a single person. In the meantime, there's a guard making his rounds in the cell area. He is initially tricked by the dummy, but finds it weird that Frank hasn't moved when he comes by again later. The guard's suspicions get worse when he drops his baton, and the noise doesn't even make Frank stir. But by the time he comes closer to the cell, Frank makes it back to bed, avoiding any suspicions. Honestly, I have no idea how he pulled that off. The next day, he tells his friends what he's found and checks on their progress. The brothers are almost done, but Charlie has fallen behind. Later that night, Frank and John Anglin get into the utility corridor, where they hide the raincoats they've stolen from the clothing store. Frank then stands on John's shoulders and manages to reach the ventilation shaft. He takes a closer look and realizes they'll need some serious tools to get it open. They also see an electrical outlet on the wall nearby. Hence, the next time they go to band practice, Frank asks Litmus to get him an extension cord and a drill. The latter initially hesitates, as this could get him sent to solitary confinement for a long time. However, he agrees to do so when Frank promises to give him every dessert from his plate. What would you do for a Klondike bar? Frank also takes the chance to steal a small desk fan that he sneaks inside his accordion case. Once they have all the tools, including a pen light they stole from Doc, Frank and John go back to the utility corridor to get to work. They use a pipe John tore off the wall to break the bars that protect the shaft hole. Then, Frank climbs inside along with a makeshift drill he made from the fan. He quickly takes off the screws on the metal plates that cover up the passageway. Many months have passed since Frank's arrival to Alcatraz, and the group is finally ready to escape. Charlie is worried because his fake grill keeps falling apart, but John confirms the raft will be ready next Tuesday, which means they'll be breaking out on Tuesday night. One morning during breakfast, Frank takes out the chrysanthemum Doc had left back. Litmus is pleasantly surprised to see it because it brings back memories of when he and Doc planted those flowers together, but the warden has a completely different reaction. He comes by the table and crushes it, claiming it is against the regulations. This enrages Litmus, who tries to lunge at the warden, but he suddenly passes out from a heart attack. After this encounter, the warden gets suspicious of Frank, so he orders an inspection of his cell. They find nothing unusual, and the fake grill manages to trick them, but the warden is still worried, so he orders a guard to transfer Frank to another cell. It is revealed that the paperwork required to do so will take a couple of days. Thus, Frank will be transferred to a new cell on Tuesday morning. Things get even worse as the next day, the group finds out Wolf has been planning to kill Frank. They thus decide to escape this very night instead of Tuesday. When night falls, it's finally time for the group to get going. Frank and the Anglins successfully trick the guards with their dummies and enter the utility corridor, but Charlie loses courage and stays back in his cell, sobbing at his own cowardice. Meanwhile, the rest of the group carries the makeshift raft they made out of the raincoats, and one by one climb up the ventilation shaft. They eventually make it to the roof, where they carefully sneak around by keeping an eye on the movement of the searchlights. The trio manages to cross the roof and finds a pipeline against the building's wall. This comes in handy as they slide down the pipe to reach the yard. Cautiously avoiding the searchlights, they then finally reach the fence. Following this, Frank and the Anglins climb over the barbed wire after wrapping their hands with cloth. They jump over one by one, and now are officially out of the prison's building. The following morning, during the routine checkup, the guards find out that the 3 prisoners are missing. A massive search operation is immediately started, and the whole building as well as the entire island is checked. They eventually find some of the inmates' personal effects floating in the bay. This This makes the warden believe that the escaped inmates have drowned, but one of the guards points out it could all be a decoy to make them think they're dead. The warden also finds a chrysanthemum on a rock and realizes it was left by Frank as a farewell insult. As the movie comes to an end, it is revealed that the fugitives' bodies were never found. The prison of Alcatraz was also shut down a year later.